The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on December 5th, 2022. And we have a special show today. This will be our first book review on the show. The Nation Will Follow. And we have the author here too, Colonel John Mills. But before I jump into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the Word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And on our lower left-hand corner today, we have our special guest today, retired Colonel John Mills, and he is one of the roles he held in government was Director of Cybersecurity Policy, Strategy, and International Affairs at the Department of Defense. And that is sort of related to this book that he's written, which is The Nation Will Follow. And James, maybe I could get a visual here. So this is John's website real quick before we get into it. And I wanted to show there's a picture of the book. And so you can find more information here if you want to go and look further into that. But we're going to be talking to John about some of the topics of the book today and exactly what is this issue with the deep state. Also, too, John is a columnist too for the Epoch Times, so he writes articles there as well. So you can find more of his stuff. But the deep state is something that we're going to talk about today. And it's funny because depending upon where you look, you're going to hear people talk about this as, hey, maybe the deep state is a conspiracy, and maybe it's not. But it seems like certainly if you're on the left, it's something you just sort of want to brush under the rug. But it seems like if you're liberty-minded or on the right, this is sort of a real concern. We've had a lot of issues here, especially I think front and foremost, I guess front and center. To me, it goes back to Eric Snowden and what he showed us that, hey, look, the government really is doing some stuff that we need to be aware of. I mean, and the fact that Eric Clapper or James Clapper rather was, what he exposed was that he was lying to Congress on some of this stuff. So, it's really the state doing things that it's not supposed to be doing. But John's had a lot of experience in this area. And so maybe I'll just hand it over to John. So at this point, John, do you want to tell us a little bit more about specifically what your book focuses in on? And, I guess what is the deep state?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Well, this book, I felt compelled to write this book because I realized I was in the middle of colleagues spying on candidate Trump and then President Trump. And I was involved in a number of key events before I retired from government. But I felt it was important. And I was involved in a number of programs going back to 2004, 2005 that I now realized help set up the basis for broad surveillance, which is, I would say, being used in an unlawful manner. So that's what the book is about. Me realizing colleagues were spying, getting 4 years, getting to get in front of the Durham investigation, and then action.
John, we're starting to lose your audio just a little bit. I know, was there some, I guess, audio thing you were talking about before we started on or something? Because it's starting to get a little bit staticky and cutting out a little bit.
Yes. Can you hear? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. That sounds a lot clearer.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So me realizing colleagues were spying on candidate and then President Trump, me duking it out for 4 years to get in front of the Durham investigation and give a complete statement on who was doing what at what time, And then 3, the action plan for the American citizen. Most people are upset about this. We're finding out more and more as Elon exposes more about how Twitter and the government were colluding, which is what I helped set up the foundation for 10, 15 years ago. But the action plan at the county level, it's an action plan. Steve Bannon wrote the preface, but we have to duke it out at the county level. And I mean that figuratively, not violently, of course. But it's all because the deep state stands upon the shoulders of the nanny staters in our counties. And there's only about 30 counties that cause problems in America as far as the federal election process. But that's the challenge, is we've surrendered this territory. And so citizens shouldn't get mad at Maricopa. They shouldn't get mad at Fulton. Get involved in your own county. And I give 7 specific examples of how to get involved.
John, before we go further, it's been quite a number of years I've heard the expression or the term deep state. Could you tell us exactly what or who the deep state is?
Well, in the book, I define it as bureaucrats, technocrats, and plutocrats. So the bureaucrats are the careerists, could be military, and I was both military and a career civilian. So it becomes a form of entitlement that we can do what we want to do when we want to do it. So it's the bureaucrats, it's the technocrats. Fauci is a technocrat. He is supposedly a smart guy with supposed high levels and degrees of accolades and awards, but and he seems to know better than us peons. So that's the technocrats, and then the plutocrats are, in many ways, that's where big tech comes into play, and what has developed with this influence of big tech and now clearly direct coordination between them. So those are the 3 components of the deep state, but they also tie in directly to the globalists who have a common agenda for everyone around the world.
So are you saying, and I guess this is the premise of your book, if I'm understanding you correctly, are you saying that these 3 groups of people and then maybe 4 with the globalists are working together to crush our liberties, to take control of our lives in ways that the founding fathers never intended?
Absolutely. And I've been at White House meetings where it's been said essentially verbatim in a number of venues and forums. The American people don't know what they want. We know what's best for the American people. It's very dangerous when government starts thinking like that.
Are you? No, you're saying this was actually said? This was actually said? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. We know what's best for the American people. The American people don't know what they want. And it is an attitude that is pervasive across the swamp in Washington, D.C. It's an attitude, but it's funny because you talk to some of these people, and they'd say, "Oh, but I'm a conservative." But then you start, okay, well, tell me. You say you're conservative. Let's talk about that. And then, as you start dialoguing with them, they start to say things that, well, a conservative wouldn't assert. The government works for the people, not the other way around.
Right.
And just by asserting that the government knows best, right off the bat, whoever would say that cannot say that they're a constitutional conservative. So, yeah, it's a very and we need to have transparency.
It sounds like Central Planning 101.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, right out of the central planner's playbook, well, we know what's best and you at the bottom don't know what's best. So we'll tell you what to do.
Lord.
Yes. Well, so could you give us a little bit of a tour, I guess, through your career journey, so we kind of know? It sounds like you've held a lot of posts. I talked about your post there at the as the director of the cybersecurity policy, strategy, international affairs at the Department of Defense. But I know you've worn a lot of other hats too. Do you want to kind of tell us how you first got into national security and sort of what
Oh,
your journey has been like?
okay. Well, I mean, to make it real quick, I first joined the military in 1983. So that was my starting point for the national security world. So I went over time.
John, your audio is getting a little scratchy again. Please, sorry.
Oh, okay. It's getting scratchy. Let me see.
Staticky.
Well, it looks like John is checking his electronics, so we'll just carry on the conversation while we wait for him to get back in.
Yes.
But this is something that. Oh, there we go, John.
Yes, John.
Okay, we just
Yeah.
got you back. So, yeah, we thought maybe the deep state got you there for a second.
That's been my first thought all along. But
Yeah. So let's see. So are you able to hear us now, John? Oh, we can't hear you now.
yeah, get those AirPods connected. That's sometimes takes a while. No.
Can you hear us now, or? Okay, it looks like John's still messing with that, but yeah, for those of you who are out there listening, I mean, I think really the Eric Snowden thing, if there's any doubts that the government isn't, John, can you hear us now?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Great, we can hear you clear now too. So
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Excellent. Yeah. So, anyways, you were just about to tell us of your journey, I guess, through national security, and so I guess we'll hand the floor back to you.
Well, I mean, things really got interesting, obviously, with 9/11, and I think that was toward the second third of my 30 plus years of national security service. And so 9/11, really getting that straight, and I was sent down to Central Command to help come up with the Afghanistan plan. We didn't have a plan.
And just curious, what was your role at that point during 9/11? Were you, what area of government were you working in, and I guess what position did you hold?
Well, so I was working for the government, but I was mobilized as a back onto active duty, and I was a planner. And so I went down to the Central Command staff in Tampa, Florida, and because we just didn't have a plan, and so the whole point was to put a plan together. Long story short, things started going our way. Things went on for a while, worked counterterrorism in several other locations, but then the focus was on Iraq and removing Mr. Hussein from office. So that's part of where I worked. I was the lead in putting together called the New Iraqi Army, and it was essentially Iraqi expatriates that we were organizing for regime change in Iraq. So did that. We removed Mr. Saddam. Spent a number of years doing that stuff. It wasn't. Yeah, obviously we probably could have done something better in hindsight, but it was also the beginning. It was the beginning of the forever war. Well, actually, I'd even go back further with my time in Bosnia. That was really the beginning of the forever war concept that Mr. Trump has so ably pointed out. But coming more toward the current time, about 2007 is when I was brought into the cyber world. And I was in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And my boss, who was from NSA, came in and said, "Hey, we want you to be the DoD senior representative to this thing called the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative." I said, "Oh, good, good. What's this all about?" And that's where I really learned the interagency proceedings, and that for a time I was at the White House and the National Security Council, end of Obama, end of Bush, beginning of Obama. But that's where we set up a massive, publicly deemed as an improvement to cybersecurity, but there was a whole lot of other things going on. It essentially was the foundation for mass surveillance. And what could possibly go wrong here? Well, obviously, we're experiencing a lot of things could possibly go wrong. But coming forward, that's when I realized in early 2016, that's when things really began to get jazzed up, and there was all this excited chatter in our meetings and our work that the Russians and China were meddling in our elections again. And okay, they probably were, and we probably meddle in their stuff. We do. And but what was this was a little bit different than previous times, and it really got hot around. And this is like one of the key vignettes in my book is in July of 2016, I ran into a former Bush appointee who was in the building to be a graybeard on a working group. And I was rushing to a meeting. He was rushing to a meeting. I said, "Hey, you're gonna support Trump at the convention, right? You're gonna support Trump at the convention." And his response changed my life. It was, "No, we see more opportunities with her." And at that point in time, I realized that there was a deep state, there was a uniparty. It's us versus them, and we're at war.
So wait, let me see if I understand what you just said. So a former Bush appointee said to you, you see more opportunities with her, I assume referring to Hillary Clinton.
That's what he was referring to. So, and he represented the Bush. He was a Bush appointee and represented these groups are small and close knit. Yes. And when he says we, he's talking about the Bushies.
This and what opportunities was he referring to specifically?
Well, I got right back in his face. I said, "Who is we, and what opportunities do you see?" Now, I didn't make physical contact with him or anything like that, but I was on my way to a meeting. I had to get going. He was on his way to a meeting. He had to get going, but it's like, okay, we just saw what the plan was. I realized this is insidious. So going on about a month before the election in 2016, I was at a meeting in London, and I just coincidentally was at a dinner that was unrelated. I was there in a Five Eyes coordination meeting, but that's the 5 English-speaking countries in our traditional relationship since World War II. And a very senior former law enforcement official that I'd worked with closely at the White House and other places was on the flight, and we caught up, and then we were at this dinner. We didn't even know we were at this dinner, and he had a meltdown. We go around during these dinners and kind of introduce ourselves and what we're passionate. And he said, "We're going to prove that Trump is a Russian asset." Remember, this is about a month out from the election, and it's like everybody's going, Trump. This was not a story at the time. As everybody's looking around, what do you mean Trump is a Russian? And most people I'd say fell into more the globalist category, and most of them were going, "Oh, come on, Hillary's going to clean him up and win. What are you talking about?" But he was just over the top passionate about this. And I said, I've never seen him like this. So going on after the election, a couple of days after the election, I was called on the top secret phone and said, "John, we're forming an interagency committee to finalize the Russian narrative and delay or block the inauguration." And I said, "This is insanity."
Well, at the time, since Trump was running, the government was sort of under the Obama administration then at the time. So,
Yes.
I mean, you definitely think this was more of a thing, not necessarily directed by the people in control, but just by the mechanisms of all of these people with self-interest and, that went outside of whatever their chain of command was, but just sort of preserving their power, I guess, of their agencies and stuff.
Yeah, we kind of caught them flat-footed because they were just Trump is a hayseed. There's no way he's going to win. He's going to get cleaned up. So they let their guard down, and Trump won. So, but they had started, and we were just the massive surveillance state, including the relationships with big tech, were still a bit in their infancy, but they learned, okay, we just had our entitled presidency taken away from us. We're not going to let this happen again, which is fast forward to 2020. And that's where they just went no holds barred, every form, every possible procedure. It's going to be a wild bum rush to make sure this doesn't happen again, which proceeds to where we're at today. But that's I was at ground zero of this, and we set up the mass surveillance state under the program from 2007 to 2014, and the beginnings. There was several different venues that I helped set up personally. I wrote the paperwork for. Hey, what's the matter with this big tech coordination with government? What's the matter with it? It's a good idea. We should interchange, share information, best practices. What could possibly go wrong? Well, we're seeing it.
So essentially, you are saying, if I'm understanding you correct, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Essentially, you're saying that the deep state was actively at work during the 2020 elections to get us where we are today.
Yeah, I would say yes. The holistic deep state went full bore, 1,000 miles an hour in all directions to make sure that Trump was not reelected, did not go to a second term, at least at that time.
And I think this is something we're kind of seeing, at least with some of the stuff that Elon Musk is exposing. That and of course Mark Zuckerberg's interview on the Joe Rogan show as well. The fact that he literally told Joe Rogan that the FBI came to him just shortly before, or not too far before that New York Post story on the Hunter Biden laptop was going to be aired. And hey, look, there's likely to be this big Russian misinformation story. So we just want you to, I guess, be aware of that. It was hard to say. Zuckerberg was a little bit vague in the terms that he was giving, that their warning was from the FBI, but just the idea that they were out there promoting this while the FBI was literally sitting on the laptop at the time. They had the laptop.
As a matter of fact, the FBI had Hunter Biden's laptop for a year prior to the election. So they knew that this was not any Russian misinformation or anything like that. So any narrative that was developed after that was nothing but a lie, plain and simple. And just to be clear, Zuckerberg did not say the FBI came to him personally. They came to his team. That's what he said. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And it's just like when I was called a couple of days after the election in 2016, so I sat on this interagency team to generate this report. It's publicly available on the DNI website, the Director of National Intelligence, but that's the unclassified version. But it comes back for staffing we write it. It comes back to the departments and agencies for final concurrence. So I had to review it before Ash Carter signed off. And my recommendation was, this report has no evidence. The executive summary starts off with Trump is a Russian asset. There's nothing in the body of the report that demonstrates he is a Russian asset. I said, sir, I'm sorry. I sat on this. I know this was a top secret panel. I non-concur, and I recommend you non-concur with it, sir, because there is no evidence that Trump is a Russian asset. And their response was, again, kind of life-changing. Said, John, don't worry about this. Ash Carter has already signed off, because now this is critical. Comey and Brennan are personally hands on keyboard preparing this short document. You never get a director of CIA and FBI personally hitting the keys on the keyboard writing this. And Grinnell and Ratcliffe exposed in their declassification. That means Comey and Brennan were willfully lying because they knew the story was fake, yet they ran with it.
Wow. Jesus, Lord.
Well, John, we're starting to get close to the end. It just seems like time flies when you're when you're really getting into something interesting. But we're starting to get close to the end of the show, and I wanted you talked about things that people could do, and I wonder if maybe you want to maybe get into that just a little bit more. If somebody is sitting there and they're saying, "Wow, this is some crazy stuff. What can I do at home?" Or in my county, I guess level, wherever that is locally.
Yeah. All 33, there's roughly 3,300 counties and county equivalents in America. They're the foundation of governance and voting. They are the foundation. If the vote is dirty at the county level, it's not going to get cleaner as it goes up the chain. It's all about your county. There's 7 common centers of gravity in all of these 3,300. And I urge all citizens to pick one of these 7 and get to know them and understand it. And that's your registrar, or in Arizona, they're called recorders. That's your election board. That's your county council. That's your school board. That's your county judges, your county prosecutors, and the all-important sheriff. Read your state laws, understand the roles and missions of these 7. Pick one of these 7, the one you're most familiar with, the one you're most attracted to, and start attending their meetings, start asking them questions, and start holding them accountable. And I eat my own dog food on this. I just did a court petition and had my own election board and had my own election board and registrar brought into a court for a court hearing because of my concerns with them. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm fairly familiar with legal stuff, but I put them on the stand and I cross-examine them, and every citizen can do that.
Okay. Well, John, we're almost at the end of the show. Are there any final messages or thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with? And James, maybe you could bring the website up again for John's book.
Yeah, that's thenationwillfollow.com. Thenationwillfollow.com. And thank you so much. And it's just get involved in your county, secure your county, and the nation will follow.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Boy, I tell you, this is certainly a timely discussion given all of the craziness that's going on out there right now, especially with Elon sort of turning the lights on at Twitter and showing what's going on under the covers there. But for all of our guests, thank you for watching. And we're going to have another discussion with John Mill about a story called The Innovation Race, but that's going to be on the next episode. So we'll catch you there. And thanks again, John, for joining us on this one. Until then, stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.